and gentlemen, President Abdel Fattah Sisi has started a 4-day African tour on Monday that included Tanzania, Rwanda, Gabon, and Chad. And President Sisi held various talks and meetings with African leaders with the aim of addressing common challenges facing the continent. And he also discussed updates on regional issues related to preserving security and welfare. And as we heard earlier in the promotion, the president said in his speech that he is looking forward to making Egypt key role in the African continent when it comes to trade and investment, and also play a key role to meet the aspirations of African people. In order to further discuss the aim of the visit and also the results of President Abdel Fattah Sisi's visit to African countries, we are very much delighted to have with us Mr. Taha, researcher in the African Studies Institute. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Taha.
Good afternoon, Mr. Taha. First of all, how do you see the choice of these 4 countries and at this particular timing?
These visits came as a part of the Egyptian view toward the African continent and its new grand strategy toward the international relations in general, and especially after the revolution of 30 June revolution in Egypt. The Egyptian perception toward its outer space and its international relations has been changed into new horizons and new aspirations to rebuild its image in international arena. So the key word in this point is the Egyptian state. Nowadays we are speaking about the Egyptian state. President Abdel Fattah Sisi, in his tour to these 4 state visits to 4 African states, came takes the Egyptian states into new horizons, new spaces in the African continent. El Gabon, for example, is this. As El Gabon, this is the first visit to an Egyptian president. Tanzania, several years, there was no president has visited Tanzania since President Gamal Abdel Nasser. Egypt has a good image and excellent image because of its history in supporting Africans in several stages in their history, especially after getting their liberation from colonialism. So, but recently, I think during the last 3 or 4 decades, there was no good efforts made by the Egyptian officials. We had a symbolic existence but not real existence in the African continents. But nowadays, this tour of President El Sisi, it's important getting it. It's very important because it's El Sisi take Egypt into a new horizons to the African to support its grand strategy toward the African affairs.
Yes, sir, you just mentioned that. Although Egyptian-African relations have been very strong during Abdel Nasser's era, yet it cooled down, let's say, afterwards, and it was revived again after President Abdel Fattah Sisi took office, because there was focus more on the role of Egypt in Africa. And during the visit, there was special emphasis on trade and investment. How do you see this?
Trade and investment are the main issues in the presidential agenda in this tour, because of there is essential needs both for the Egyptians, Egyptian state and the African states also. We are passing a serious area. It's Egypt state rebuilding Egyptian states after the instability period recently. So Egypt is looking for to open new horizons, new fields of investment, and make bilateral and multilateral cooperation with the African states. So our vision to toward the Africans, not all it's not because of its importance, because of Nile basin and Nile water issues, but rather it's because our essential future, our future as a common future between Egypt and African states. So trade, investment, and also mutual cooperation on the other fields like fighting terrorism and keeping stability in the African countries, and also making common work in the international institutions, especially in the UN institutions like Security Council and African Union, and the common issues between Egypt and the African countries. I think it's important to foster such relations and make a deeper and harder ties, especially upon the trade and investment levels. If we imagine the other experience, like the European experience, I think in the mid of 50s in the 20th century, it began and it started from economy. So if you want to make a real massive work in the African continent, a real union in Africans, involve Egypt as a part of Africans, I think it has to start from economy. So it's important. It's important of that's why trade and investment is a high priority for Egyptian presidential tour agenda.
Another important topic that was discussed was the matter of security and means of cooperation to combat terrorism. How do you see the announcements following the various press conferences in terms of such type of cooperation?
Egypt Egypt nowadays recently faces a serious campaign of terrorism against the Egyptian state. So Egypt has launched a grand and serious campaign against terrorism. So Egypt has a unique experience in fighting terrorism. So Egypt has to expert its experience toward the Africans in fighting terrorism that are striking. Recently, you saw Nigeria has been launched, has been struck by several terrorist attack everywhere, and also in the Horn of Africa there are terrorist attack everywhere also. So Egyptian states want to gain more lessons from Egyptian experience in fighting terrorism. So one of the main approaches that Egypt wanted to give its hand to Africans by transferring its experience in fighting terrorism.
And sir, we are talking now about African-Egyptian relations during Abdel Nasser era, and back then President Abdel Nasser was dreaming of launching what was called the Pan-African project. With the visit now by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, which is not the first, of course, and will not be the last, because there have been previous visits to several African countries, and the President announced that there will be much more cooperation in the coming period. Do you think that these visits would mark the beginning of achieving, or perhaps might be reviving the dream of President Abdel Nasser of achieving his project?
I think it's exactly, but in a new form. The circumstances in African continent nowadays is very different from the 50 decades before. But the main dream of Africans is still we have to liberate ourselves from the foreign hegemony and the foreign intervention, and also support our state building in our countries, and also to make a unique African Renaissance. From these three principles, the current visit of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi came to foster and to support Africans in their to achieve their great dreams of Pan-Africanism, but in a new shape, not to liberate from colonialism, because nowadays there is no colonialism, but nowadays there is, yes, a new form of colonialism. But the main problem of Africans to how to exploit their resources, and to how to fight the internal and the domestic and local problems like ignorance, like poverty, like less developed industry there, and also how to get more active player in international issues. You saw Egypt, I think months before, spoke in the name of Africans in international events like in climate changes, and to compensate the Africans about the losses they gained because of the misuse of industry and other issues. So I think it's, as you mentioned, it's a new colonialism, but the main and the great issue and the problem face the Africans, it's internally. We have to resurvive and resurrect our African soul and African dream, to rebuild our countries, and to fight terrorism, and to make a real bilateral and multilateral relations between our countries. And also our Renaissance will never get from abroad. It will come. It should come from ourselves as Africans. Egyptian perception to itself is it's a great nation, great African nation, not just Egypt. It's African Egypt. The Africans themselves see Egypt as a great part of Egyptian continent. Several intellectuals like Sheikh Anta Diop, like Marcus Garvey, like Pan-Africanism intellectuals saw Egypt as a cornerstone of Pan-Africanism. Even some of them see Egypt as the Egyptian civilization. Pharaohs was Africans. I think Professor Sheikh Anta Diop speak in his great book as the negritude that Pharaoh's civilization was a negritude also. So they see us as a part of them. So we should give them our hands, and to work together to achieve such dream.
Well, you were mentioning now the cooperation between the various African countries and lending a hand to one another, and that would lead us to the empowerment of youth, because now if we want to develop our nations, the youth form a big bulk of it, and especially that this year's AU theme was empowerment of youth in terms of the demographic dissidents. So how can that be achieved? How can we empower our youth for the welfare of our African continent?
Egypt has a great experience in the level of industry and education and health and all levels because of its great experience during the last decades. So Egypt has to export its experience to the Africans. I think there was several agreements has been signed during this visit between Egypt and El Gabon, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Chad also. There are several agreements to maximize the benefit from our experience in there. So the years of Egyptian absence in African arena should be stopped now, not after. Now, not later. we have to stop our absence from the African continent, because it's very important for us to gain our power and strength from working together with the Africans. The agreement was signed between the Egyptian Ministry of Commerce and other and this industry and the African their African counterpart. I think it can play an important role to foster our relations, to exchange our experience in fighting underdevelopment and poverty in the African countries. Also, Egypt has a good relations in the level of cultural relations, especially with Chad. Egypt give an important and great chances to the Chadians and the Gaboni and the other African people to get their to educate them in El Azhar and the Cairo University.
So the key factor is to cooperate together for the welfare of our nation and our continent. Mr. Taha Ali, researcher in the African Studies Institute, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a short break with Cruise Online, and we'll be right back to resume this edition of My Cruise.